Dr. Chad Villalma to lead us in the FPU prayer.
Let us put ourselves in the most holy presence of the Lord. Let us pray the FEU prayer in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Direct, O God, we beseech you, all our actions by your holy inspiration, and help us on by your gracious assistance, so that every prayer and work of ours may begin with you and by you happily ended. Amen. Name Father, Son,
Morning class, can you hear me?
Okay, can you focus on the first slide, Dr.? Okay, before we proceed with our main topic, let us review first our anatomy for better understanding of the diseases of the lens. No? Remember that the eyeball has three main layers. We have the outer, the middle, and the inner layer. With the outer layer, which is composed of your cornea and your sclera, with the cornea occupying the anterior 1/6 of your outer layer, and the sclera occupying the posterior 5/6. So the outer layer is the toughest layer of your eyeball, except for a small portion at the posterior area of your sclera, where the optic nerve connects with your eyeball. This is the weakest point of the eyeball. Now, the middle layer is the vascular layer of your eyeball. It comprises of the following structures: the iris, the ciliary body, and your choroid. Okay? The iris is a structure that separates the anterior and posterior chamber, and it has a central aperture, which we call the pupil. The pupil allows the passage of light to pass through the eyeball, and also it allows the passage of aqueous humor coming from your posterior chamber into your anterior chamber. Now, the ciliary body contains your ciliary processes and your ciliary muscle. The ciliary processes produces your aqueous humor, which is responsible for the nutrition of your lens and the corneal endothelium. It also contains the ciliary muscle, okay, wherein your ciliary your sonules of sins are attached, which is responsible for your accommodation. Now, on the posterior side, you have your choroid, which supplies the anterior portion of the blood supply, which is responsible for the blood supply of the outermost layer of your retina. Now, the innermost layer is the sensory portion of your eyeball, which is the retina. The yellow line that you can see on the posterior portion of your eyeball is your retina. Now, inside the eyeball, we have three different chambers, no? We have the anterior chamber, we have the posterior chamber, and the vitreous chamber. Now, the anterior chamber is bounded anteriorly by the posterior surface of your cornea and posteriorly by the anterior surface of your iris. Okay? It contains aqueous humor. It has a volume of around 0.20 cc of aqueous humor. Now, the posterior chamber is a small chamber which is bounded anteriorly by the posterior surface of your iris and posteriorly by the anterior surface of your lens and your sonules. It contains aqueous humor with a volume of 0.06 cc. Okay. Now, behind the lens, you have a bigger chamber, which we call the vitreous humor. It contains a gel-like structure, which is responsible for the form of your eyeball. It prevents the retina from collapsing. No, it holds the retina in its position. Okay. Now, between the chamber, between the anterior and posterior chamber and your vitreous humor, there is a transparent structure which is located centrally, which is your lens. No, the lens is a vascular structure which is held in position by the ciliary sonules of Sim. Okay, it is one of the refractive media of your eyeball. There are two main refractive media of your eyeball: the cornea and the lens. Okay, can you next slide, please? Okay. Now, let's go now to the lens. The lens is a biconvex, a vascular, colorless, and almostly completely transparent structure, about 5 by 10 millimeter in diameter. No? Now, it has several parts. One, we have the lens capsule, which surrounds the whole lens. You have your anterior capsule and your posterior capsule. Now, behind the anterior capsule, you have a single layer of epithelial cells, which we call the lens epithelium. The lens epithelium is responsible for the metabolism of the entire lens. It has a active producing active cells, especially located in the equatorial area. You will notice that the epithelium contains nuclei, nucleus. And the nucleus that you can see in the equatorial area are the one that is actively metabolically active producing cells. They produces lens fibers throughout life. Okay. Now, when the fibers are produced, they contain nucleus. Okay, it has a anterior processes and a posterior processes. Now, the posterior process of the lens fiber is attached to your posterior capsule. Okay, when more lens fibers are produced, the older one are pushed towards the center. Okay, newly formed lens fiber constitute your cortex, or the older lens fiber constitute your nucleus. Okay, so the more centrally located lens fibers are your nucleus, and the more peripheral lens fiber are your cortex. Okay. Now, at the equatorial area of your lens, there is sonular fibers which connects the lens into your ciliary body. And you will notice the attachment of the sonular fibers. The anterior attachment is more forward than the posterior attachment. This is important in the process of accommodation. Okay. Now, why is it that the lens is transparent? The lens is transparent because of the spatial correlation between protein molecules. It is avascular, it is colorless, and its lens fibers have the same index of refraction. And another factor which is important is the lens is in a state of relative dehydration, which we call the turgescence, which is the sodium potassium adenosine triphosphatase pump is the one responsible for maintaining the state of relative dehydration, wherein potassium is retained inside the lens and expelling out excess sodium. Okay? So more sodium are more concentrated outside of the lens in the aqueous humor, while inside potassium is concentrated. This causes the lens to be in a state of relative dehydration. Okay. Now, the lens fibers are produced throughout life. Okay. So the weight of the lens at birth is usually 100 milligrams, and then it can reach 250 milligrams in adult. Okay. The lens contains 65% water and 35% proteins. It has one of the highest concentration of proteins in the human body. So we have soluble and insoluble proteins. The lens is transparent because of the greater number of soluble proteins. If there is a balance, if there is an increase in insoluble proteins, then the lens loses its transparency. Okay. Now, the energy of lenticular metabolism is mainly from your glucose. Remember that the lens is avascular. It has no blood supply. It has no nerve supply. Okay? So the glucose metabolism is mainly anaerobic. 85% of the glucose metabolism is anaerobic. Now, anaerobic metabolism is an efficient energy producer. For every molecule of glucose, you only produce 2 ATPs. Now, 15% of the glucose metabolism inside the lens is aerobic. Surprisingly, why there is aerobic metabolism inside the lens wherein there is no blood supply. Remember that your ciliary processes is highly vascular. So some of the oxygen that leaks out in the ciliary processes goes into your aqueous humor, and then from the aqueous humor, it goes inside the lens, okay? So while they flow inside the lens, 15% of glucose is metabolized through aerobic metabolism. And usually aerobic metabolism is more efficient because for every glucose molecule, you produce 32 ATPs. Okay, now, next slide, please. Now, what are the function of the lens? Okay, the main function of the lens is to focus light rays into the retina through refraction and accommodation. What is refraction? Refraction is the bending of light rays that passes from one medium to another. And accommodation is focusing of near objects upon the retina. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, if you will notice in this slide, the curvature of the cornea and the lens is more or less similar. But the cornea is the main refractive media of your eye compared to your lens, okay? Remember that the light rays passes from a gaseous medium into a solid medium. When light rays passes from a gaseous medium to a solid medium, there will be greater bending of light. While in the lens, the light rays passes from a liquid medium into a solid medium where there is less bending of light rays. So the cornea contains about 43 diopteric power, while the lens contains only around 20 plus or minus. Now the difference is that although the cornea has a greater refractive power, the lens can change its refractive power while the lens is fixed. Okay? Now, how do the lens change its refractive power? The lens can change its refractive power through accommodation. So it can increase the antero-posterior diameter. When an object increases its antero-posterior diameter, then the refractive power increases. On the first photo, you will notice that the image is focused directly into the retina. It means that the refractive power of the cornea and the lens is enough to focus the image directly into the retina. Okay? So here you have to consider several things. The power of the refractive power of your cornea and lens, and then the length of your eyeball. So you can produce different situation if you alter one of these factors. Okay. Now the photo below, where you have myopia, you will notice that the image is focused in front of the retina. Okay, how do you produce myopia? Myopia can be produced by increasing the convexity of your cornea. You will notice that the cornea is more convex in this photo. So if you increase the convexity of the cornea, then the refractive power of the cornea increases. So when you have increased refractive power, the image will be focused in front of the retina. The second factor is that when length of the eyeball, which is normally 23 millimeter to 25 millimeter, if you increase the antero-posterior diameter of the eyeball, then naturally that image will be focused in front of the retina. Okay, so you produce a condition which we call myopia or nearsighted. On the photo on the right side, lower right side, you will notice a image that is focused behind the retina. Then you will notice that the cornea is flat, or the length of the eyeball is shorter. So if the cornea is flat, then you have less refractive power. The image will be focused behind. Or if the length of the eyeball is short, then the image will also focus behind the retina, producing a condition which we call hyperopia. So you have emmetropia, wherein there is a perfect alignment, focusing of the image in the retina. You have myopia, wherein the image is focused in front, and hyperopia, wherein the image is focused behind the retina. Next slide, please. Okay, now what is accommodation? Accommodation is a physiologic interplay of the ciliary body, sonules, and the lens that results in the of near objects upon the retina. Okay. What happens in accommodation? Remember that the ciliary muscle is a circular muscle, okay? And through your ciliary muscle, the sonules are attached to the equator of your lens. If there is contraction of your ciliary muscle, it means there will be shortening of your ciliary muscle. So when the ciliary muscles shorten, then there will be relaxation of your sonules. So when the sonules are relaxed, the antero-posterior diameter of your lens increases because the lens capsule is somewhat elastic. So what happens when the antero-posterior diameter of your lens increases? So the refractive power also increase. So you have more power. This is where you can focus near objects. So the image will be focused in the retina. In the opposite side, you will, if there is no accommodation, meaning the ciliary muscle is relaxed. So when the ciliary muscle is relaxed, it is elongated, okay? So there will be stretching of your sonules. When there is a stretching of your sonules, it will pull the capsule of your lens towards the periphery. So when the capsule are pulled towards the periphery, there will be thinning of your lens. So the lens become narrowed, so less antero-posterior diameter. So you have less refractive power. Okay, next slide, please. Now, what is presbyopia? Presbyopia is a is the physiologic recession of the near point of accommodation, meaning there is a loss of accommodation due to aging process. It is due to sclerosis of your ciliary muscle, thickening of your ciliary muscle, it becomes hardened, okay? Then the lens capsule become less elastic, okay? So this is physiologic. Usually, you will experience this when you reach the age of 40 for male and usually age of 37 for female. Now in adolescent period, you have a accommodative power of 12 to 16 diopter. When you reach the age of 40, you will have an accommodative power of 4 to 8 diopter. Then when you reach more than age 50, you have less accommodative power, less than 2 diopter. So as you grow older, you need greater refractive power, which can be done by placing a reading correction. Next slide. Okay, in presbyopia, the symptoms of presbyopia is inability to read fine prints or discriminate fine close objects at about age 40 for male and about 37 for female. The normal reading distance is around 13 to 15 inches away from your eyeball. If you start distancing the reading objects away from your eye, then it means that's a sign of presbyopia. Okay, now the appearance of a presbyopia is similar to your hyperopia, but this is for near vision, no? In near vision, the image, the photo in the bottom right side, you will notice that the image is focused behind the retina, okay? So usually, person with this disability usually brings the object away from his or her eyes so that the image will be focused in the retina, or you can place convex lens in front of the eye so that you can focus the image directly into your retina. So you correct this by placing plus lenses. Plus lenses are convergent lenses, okay? While minus lenses are divergent lenses, okay? Next slide, please. Okay, now what are the symptoms of lens disorder? Aside from your presbyopic symptoms, which is physiologic, the symptoms of lens disorders are mainly due to opacification of the lens and dislocation, okay? So when you have loss of lens transparency, naturally, you will have diminished visual acuity. Then you have spots in the visual field or presence of glare in the visual field. Now, in dislocation of the lens, naturally, because you remove the lens from its normal function, there will be refractive symptoms. So what happens when the lens is no longer present in its normal position? The lens becomes hyperopic because you remove the refractive power of the lens. The image will be focused behind the lens. Now, what happens if there is only partial dislocation? If there is partial dislocation, then there will be two images formed. One image is being refracted and the other image not being refracted. So when you have two images, patient will experience monocular diplopia. So you will experience monocular diplopia. Next slide, please. Okay, what are the signs of lens disorders? If there is total opacity of the lens, sometimes it's very easy to visualize it. Even using with your pen light, you can see a whitish pupillary reflex as shown in the first picture. But if there is partial opacification of the lens, then it's very difficult to visualize it with your pen light or with your naked eye. So you will need special equipment such as your slit lamp or your ophthalmoscope. Okay, when you use your ophthalmoscope, normally when you focus on the lens, on the pupil, especially if it is dilated, you will notice a red-orange reflex. Okay, so with the presence of a cataract will be present dark reflex. So depending upon the size and the location of the cataract, you will notice black reflex. No, if it is centrally located and rounded, you will notice a black reflex surrounded by a peripheral red-orange reflex. That is in nuclear cataract. Now, if the cataract is cortical and it is located peripherally, you will notice a spoke-like black reflex in the periphery, then with the red-orange reflex in the central portion. Okay. Now, what happens if the whole lens is opaque? With your ophthalmoscope, you will notice a black reflex, negative orange-red reflex. Okay, so it means that the whole lens is totally opaque. Now, what is iridodenesis? Iridodenesis is a sign of patient with complete dislocation of the lens. If the lens is no longer in its normal position, the iris loses its lenticular support. So the iris trembles or tremulous. So when you notice trembling of the iris or tremulousness of the iris, then that is what we call iridodenesis. Okay? It is a sign of lens dislocation, or if the patient had undergone cataract surgery and the lens was removed intentionally, then you will also have some form of iridodenesis. So iridodenesis means the absence of lens in its normal position. Okay? Next slide, please. Now, how do we examine the lens? Okay. It is best done with a dilated pupil, no? You can examine with your pen light, slit lamp, or your ophthalmoscope. If the cataract is dense, then you can visualize it with your pen light. But it is best visualized with the slit lamp or ophthalmoscope. When it is less dense, then it is best examined with the slit lamp and with your ophthalmoscope. Okay? This photo shows an example of a biomicroscopy or slit lamp examination, and the other one is with indirect ophthalmoscopy. Okay. Next slide, please. Now, let's go now to cataract. No? About 80 to 90% of all eye surgery is usually due to cataract extraction. Okay? 80 to 90% of our surgery is about cataract. Now, there are several causes of cataract. We have the acquired. Among the acquired, the most common is your age-related. So when we say cataract, we are almost dealing with age-related cataract. About 80% of our cataract are due to age-related. Then cataract can also be caused by trauma. Ocular diseases such as uveitis, glaucoma, use cataract. Systemic diseases such as your diabetes, one of the more common causes of cataract secondary to your systemic diseases. Now we also have childhood cataract, which is mostly congenital or acquired. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, how do we produce age-related cataract? The main pathophysiology of age-related cataract is protein denaturation and hydrolysis. Okay? Protein denaturation and hydrolysis. As we grow older, more insoluble proteins accumulate inside the lens, and because of the increased pressure, osmotic pressure inside the lens, you imbibe more water coming from the aqueous, producing hydrolysis. When there is hydrolysis, the lens fiber become edematous, losing its transparency. Okay? Now, these are the biochemical changes that happen inside the lens in patient with cataract, age-related cataract. There is increase in sodium concentration. Okay? There is increase also in insoluble proteins and diminished soluble proteins. Okay? Increase bound water, reflecting loss of binding site, causing edema of the lens fiber. There is widespread oxidative changes, producing decreased glutathione concentration inside the lens and oxidation of your methionine and cysteine. Okay, next slide. Jed, next slide, please. Okay, now how do we classify age-related cataract? We can there are several classifications, no? The main and the most common classification we do is we classify it according to degree of opacification. We call a age-related cataract immature when there are transparent fibers that are still present. How do you know that there are still transparent fibers? If you check the visual acuity of the patient, the visual acuity is still relatively good, no? And when you use your ophthalmoscope, you will notice red-orange reflex with the presence of a black reflex, depending upon the severity, no? When there are no longer transparent fibers, we call the cataract as mature. So if you use your ophthalmoscope, there will be a negative red-orange reflex, okay? Then we call a hypermature cataract if there is wrinkling of your capsule and then your cortex becomes liquefied. So we call that hypermature cataract. Okay. Now we call it intumescent if there is swelling of the lens fiber, usually producing secondary glaucoma. When there is secondary glaucoma, due to the swelling of the lens fibers, we call it intumescent. Okay, next slide. Okay, these are the example of the different types of cataract according to severity. No? On the upper photo on the left side, we call this cataract as immature. You will notice that there are lens fibers that are still transparent, although the nucleus appears to be hazy, the cortical portion is still transparent. So in this case, the patient has relative good vision. On the upper photo on the right side, you will notice there is complete opacification of the lens fiber. Okay? So even using your pen light, you will notice this chalky white appearance. No? So with your ophthalmoscope, there will be negative orange-red reflex. The photo on the left side, you will notice that there is wrinkling of your capsule. Okay? And the chalky white appearance of the lens cortex. No? Now, in this stage, usually the lens cortex is broken down to smaller molecules. So the lens cortex is somewhat liquefied. Okay? Now, as shown in the right photo below, this is a type of hypermature cataract, severe hypermature cataract, wherein the lens cortex is completely liquefied. Okay? You will notice the milky appearance, the lens. You will notice a yellowish-brown structure inferiorly, which represent your nucleus. So, since the cortex is completely liquefied, it can no longer hold the nucleus in its normal position. So the nucleus settle down in the inferior side. We call this condition as Morgaggian cataract. Okay? Next slide. Okay, now we can also classify age-related cataract according to its location. No? We have here nuclear sclerosis, we have cortical cataract, and then we have posterior subcapsular cataract. Among these three types of cataract, the most common one is your posterior subcapsular cataract. Okay. Now, nuclear sclerosis is called hard cataract because it is composed of your nucleus, while cortical and your posterior subcapsular is called soft cataract because it is composed of your cortical material. Okay. Now, in nuclear sclerosis, remember that the lens fibers are produced continuously throughout life. Okay? So as the lens fibers are produced, they are pushed toward the center, forming a larger nucleus. So as we grow older, the nucleus becomes bigger and bigger. And because of the sclerosis, thickening of the nucleus and hardening of the nucleus, okay, there will be a myopic shift or reduction of your hyperopia. If you are emetropia in adult, usually you will experience presbyopia at the age of 40, no? So if you reach the age of around 60 and you have nuclear sclerosis, you will notice that there is a myopic shift. Suddenly, you have a better vision for near than distance. So this myopic shift is called second sight phenomenon. It is produced by nuclear sclerosis. Okay? So it is one of the reasons sometimes it's very difficult to convince patient with cataract to undergo cataract surgery because of this myopic shift, because most patients will tell you that their parents experience this myopic shift, meaning they regain the vision of their parents was regained after a certain age. So they don't want to be operated. Now, not all patients will experience second sight phenomenon because the most common type of cataract is your posterior subcapsular. All patients will have nuclear sclerosis, but at the same time, some patients will have posterior subcapsular cataract. No? And in posterior subcapsular cataract, the vision is diminished disproportionately to its size. Even if the size of the posterior subcapsular cataract is small, it produces severe visual disturbance. Okay? Now, in cortical cataract, the vision is relatively good because the opacity is located peripherally. It becomes only serious when the central portion is affected. So usually, patient with cortical cataract ends up being operated late, okay? Now, in posterior subcapsular cataract, sometimes this patient opts for immediate surgery because of the visual disturbance. They have difficulty reading or driving because of the location of the cataract, which is centrally located in the posterior capsule. So they have more decreased vision compared to your nuclear sclerosis or your cortical cataract. Now, the posterior capsular cataract is also common in patients with diabetes mellitus or in patients who have received high dose of steroid. So the findings is in diabetic cataract and cataract secondary to steroid is similar to your posterior subcapsular cataract. Next slide, please. Okay, now what are the symptoms of age-related cataract? Okay, so in age-related cataract, it is you have a progressive, painless diminution of vision. Okay, progressive, painless diminution of vision. You may also have reduced vision in bright illumination, especially in posterior subcapsular cataract. You may also have spots in the visual field, especially if the cataract is located centrally. And in some patients, you may experience second sight phenomenon. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. Another form of cataract is your traumatic cataract. Now, in contusion injury, cataract may be produced several weeks or months after the event, no? Depending upon the severity of the force applied in the surface of your eye. But there are signs that you can see or predict that the patient will develop cataract. So if you see patient with contusion injury, and if you see sign of a tear in the sphincter or a tear in the iris root, which we call iridodialysis, it means that the force impacted on the surface of the eye is serious or is severe. No, there will be also some condition which we call Boschius ring, no, presence of pigments in the anterior capsule, signifying that the sphincter of your pupil touches the anterior surface of your lens. So if the pigment is retained in the capsule, that is a sign that the injury was severe. Now, if there is rupture of the lens, then instantly you will develop cataract because of the passage of fluid of aqueous humor inside the lens, causing edema of your lens fiber, producing opacity, or a break in the in the capsule or in the lens substance itself, it will produce cataract. Now, if there is extrusion of the lens material into your lens chamber because of penetrating injury or intraocular foreign body, then the cataract is obvious. In this condition, you have to do immediate surgical intervention. Okay, next slide. Okay, now let us now go to lens-induced ocular diseases, meaning these are conditions wherein the lens is cataractous and it produces secondary ocular disease. The first condition is what we call phacolytic glaucoma. The patient has cataract. Now he has secondary glaucoma and uveitis. Now what happens in this condition? Remember that in hypermature cataract, there is liquefaction of your lens protein. The cortex becomes liquefied, meaning the lens protein is broken down to smaller molecules. When the protein is broken down to smaller molecules, they will be able to pass out from the anterior capsule. So from the anterior capsule, they goes into your anterior and posterior chamber. When in the posterior chamber, the lens particle is considered to be as a foreign body. So the lens, the eyeball, will start producing macrophages to counteract the presence of a foreign body in the anterior chamber and posterior chamber. So the macrophages engulfs the lens protein. So when the lens protein is being engulfed by the macrophages, they will flow now into your trabecular meshwork. So since the molecule become bigger, they cannot pass through the trabecular meshwork, causing obstruction in the trabecular meshwork. You will notice that the anterior chamber is open, but you will notice a whitish dandruff-like material in the trabecular meshwork, obstructing the passage of your aqueous humor. What happens if there is obstruction of the aqueous humor? There will be secondary increased intraocular pressure in your eyeball, producing secondary glaucoma. So this is a secondary type of glaucoma, which is open angle. Okay? So you have three conditions. Initially, you have hypermature cataract. Then you have uveitis. Then you have secondary glaucoma, open angle type of glaucoma. So what are the symptomatology of a phacolytic glaucoma? One, because of the cataract, naturally you will have markedly diminished visual acuity. Now, because of the inflammatory reaction, you will have photophobia, ocular pain, okay, ciliary injection. Then because of the increased pressure, then you will have corneal edema, pain, ciliary injection, headache, like that. So how do you treat this kind of secondary glaucoma? You have to bring down the pressure immediately by giving intravenous hyperesthetic agents such as your mannitol. You can give acetazolamide, a diuretic, to reduce in the intraocular pressure. And then there are several topical anti-glaucoma preparation that you can apply, except prostaglandin analog, which is prohibited because they will induce inflammatory reaction. So after controlling the inflammation and reducing the intraocular pressure, that cataract should be removed immediately, okay? So you have to do surgical intervention. So since there is glaucoma and inflammatory reaction, Even after during the process of removal of the cataract, usually we don't place intraocular lens because we might induce another secondary inflammation. We can insert intraocular lens several weeks or months after the eye have completely quiet down. Okay. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, another example of a lens-induced ocular disease is your lens particle glaucoma. Following a penetrating lens injury or surgical procedure, such as your cataract, okay, particles of the lens cortex might migrate into your anterior chamber, obstructing the trabecular meshwork. Okay, the obstruction of the lens particle in the trabecular meshwork produces secondary type of glaucoma, which is also an open type of glaucoma. So the symptomatology will more or less similar to your phacolytic glaucoma, except for the severity of the inflammation. No, so treatment is directed in lowering the intraocular pressure and controlling of the inflammatory reaction by giving corticosteroid treatment. After the pressure has been markedly diminished and the inflammation subsided, surgical removal of the retained material should be done. Now, intraocular lens implantation may or may not be done depending upon the condition of the eye at the time of surgical intervention. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now this is more common form of lens-induced ocular diseases, which is called phacomorphic glaucoma, which is a intumescent cataract. As I mentioned to you earlier, if the lens fibers becomes edematous, okay, the lens itself becomes bigger. So the increase in size of the lens causes pupillary block. It blocks the passage of your aqueous from the posterior to your anterior chamber. So the aqueous humor cannot pass through the pupil, producing increased intraocular pressure behind the iris and pupil, no? So when the pressure behind the iris increases, the peripheral portion of the iris is now pushed forward. There will be shallowing of your anterior chamber, causing obstruction of the passage of your aqueous humor into your anterior chamber angle, producing a pupillary black type of glaucoma. This is an angle closure secondary type of glaucoma. Symptoms is more or less similar to your previous two lens-induced diseases, such as your decreased vision, ocular pain, corneal edema, ciliary injection. Okay? So treatment is directed in lowering the intraocular pressure by giving intravenous mannitol. You can give oral acetazolamide and topical anti-glaucoma preparation. Okay? Now, after diminishing the pressure and control of the inflammation, you can remove the cataract. Okay? Again, placement of intraocular lens may or may not be done depending upon the condition of the eye at the time of the surgical intervention. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's go now to cataract associated with systemic diseases. No? Now, the most common of this condition is your diabetes mellitus. Now, how does diabetes mellitus produces cataract? Okay, cataract is produced by in patient with high level of glucose. Okay, remember that glucose is important in the metabolism of your lens. So glucose can enter the eye through a passive diffusion into your capsule. No? Now, while inside the lens, the glucose is converted into sugar alcohol. Okay? So when the glucose is converted into a sugar alcohol, the osmotic pressure, this sugar alcohol cannot exit through the capsule. So when it is inside the lens, they increases the osmotic pressure of your lens. So when the osmotic pressure inside the lens increases, okay, it invites more water coming from the aqueous into your lens, causing edema of the lens fiber. So when the lens fiber become edematous, they lose its transparency, producing your cataract. And usually, initially, the one that is affected are those newly formed lens fiber, which is located in your posterior capsule. So that's why you have your posterior subcapsular cataract. Okay. Now, galactosemia, hypocalcemia, Wilson's disease, myotonic dystrophy are other example of metabolic diseases that causes secondary cataract. Next slide, please. Okay. Drug-induced or toxic cataract. The most common of these is your corticosteroid. Patients who are under treatment for rheumatoid arthritis, asthma, or other condition necessitating steroid treatment, prolonged steroid treatment may induce secondary cataract formation, and usually initial cataract formation is similar to your posterior subcapsular cataract. So other drugs that produces cataract are your phenothiazine, miotics, statins. No? So depending upon the severity of the cataract, then treatment is varies. If the cataract is tiny and insignificant, you can correct the visual disturbance by adequate and frequent refraction. Okay, next slide, please. Next. Okay, now let's go now to congenital or childhood cataract. No? Congenital cataract is a common condition, but usually they are only tiny and it is located peripherally, so they are not significant to cause visual disturbance. Okay, they may not require surgery unless the visual acuity is markedly impaired. Now, if usually visual acuity is markedly impaired if the size of the cataract is more than 2 millimeter and it is located centrally. If it is located peripherally, then you don't have to do surgical intervention. Now, how do we treat congenital cataract? If there is a monocular severe cataract, we should immediate cataract surgery so that the patient can develop binocular single vision. If the other eye is prevented from seeing clearly, binocular single vision will not develop. And usually, binocular single vision is developed up to the age of 2 years, 2 years old. So before that age, okay, for you to have a binocular single vision. Now, if the condition is bilateral and it is not significant, then you may delay the cataract surgery, okay? But if it is bilateral and it is significant that causes visual disturbance, then you're justified to do cataract surgery, maybe one at a time, or some surgeon do it both eyes at the same time, depending upon the situation, okay? Some surgeon feels that it is better to do one eye at a time, but some surgeon do it at the same time so that they can rehabilitate the acuity of the patient. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, among the childhood cataract, hereditary congenital cataract comprise about 30%. About 30% of the congenital cataract is secondary to metabolic or infectious diseases, and the rest is due to undetermined causes. Other causes of acquired childhood cataract is secondary to your trauma, uveitis, infection, diabetes mellitus, or drug-induced. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now let's go now to lens developmental anomalies. No, the first section was devoted to cataract, and now remember that I mentioned to you the symptomatology of lens diseases is mainly due to opacity and dislocation. No, now let's go now to the condition that produces lens dislocation. And most of these are usually congenital or hereditary anomalies. Now, most of these lens developmental anomalies, they have a common denominator, okay? The common denominator is a partial or a complete dislocation of the lens, okay? Now, ectopia lentis means displacement or malposition of the eye crystalline lens from its normal position. We call it luxated when there is complete dislocation of the lens, meaning the lens is displaced posteriorly or anteriorly. When there is no lens present in its normal position, we call it luxated lens. Okay. When we say subluxated or subluxation, there is only partial dislocation of the lens. So some zonular fibers remain attached, acting as hints. Okay. So as a general rule, when the lens is dislocated superiorly, it is usually developmental or congenital. When the lens is dislocated inferiorly, majority of these cases is usually traumatic. Okay. Now, what do you notice in the picture shown? There is a partial dislocation of the lens inferiorly. Okay, remember that the function of the lens is for refraction, no? So if the lens is partially dislocated, what will the patient experience? Naturally, he will have blurring of vision. Okay, now since part of the light rays that passes through the pupil is partially refracted and the other half is not refracted, there will be two images formed in the retina. Okay, one that is being refracted and the other one not refracted. So the patient will complain of monocular diplopia. So this is a condition that produces monocular diplopia. Now, if there is full dislocation, meaning the lens it's not in its normal position, then you will have hyperopia because you lose the refractive power of the lens. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now these are the signs and symptoms of ectopia lentis. Iridogenesis because the absence of the lens in its normal position. You have diminished vision, monocular diplopia, okay? And usually the resultant visual vision is hyperopic vision. Now, major eye syndromes associated with ectopia lentis are your Marfan syndrome, homocystinuria, while Marchesani syndrome. So they have a common lenticular problem, which is partial or complete dislocation of your lens. Next slide, please. Chad, next slide. Now, in spiropakia, the lens is small and it's spherical. Okay, so when the lens is spherical, it has increased anteroposterior diameter. So when you have increased anteroposterior diameter, the resultant refraction of your eye will be a myopia. So because of the anterior, increase the curvature of the lens and diameter of the lens. So aside from that, because the lens is smaller, you will have iridogenesis. And because of the tightening or stretching of the sonule becomes weak. Then later on, you may produce partial dislocation. Now, if there is no dislocation, all you have is a spherical lens, what will be the danger in the eye? If you have increased anteroposterior diameter and if your pupil is constricted, it produces pupillary block, producing secondary glaucoma. So if you see a patient with spiropakia and there is risk of secondary glaucoma because of pupillary block, then you may give mydriatic agent to dilate the pupil from time to time, or you can do peripheral iridectomy through laser so that there will be no accumulation of aqueous humor behind the iris to prevent secondary glaucoma. Now, you can treat the high myopia by giving contact lens or spectacle, but usually because of the high degree of myopia, contact lens is being prescribed in those kind of patients. Lenticonus is another example where there is a concave anterior pole of the crystalline lens, no? And there is martining of the anterior lens capsule. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's go now to indications for cataract surgery. The main indication, the absolute indication for cataract surgery is that when the lens threatens to cause secondary glaucoma or uveitis. So this is an absolute indication, no? The rest are relative, okay? Most common of this indication is when the visual defect interferes with patient's vocation. So not like before, when we do intracapsular cataract surgery, we don't do cataract surgery before if the vision is better than 20/70. Okay? Right now, even if the vision is 20/40 or 20/30, If the visual defect interferes with the patient's vocation, then we're justified to do cataract surgery. Okay, so this is the number one indication, no? Relative indication. The number two relative indication is to permit fundus visualization to monitor glaucoma, to permit adequate visualization of the fundus for retinal or vitreous conditions such as your retinal diabetic retinopathy, retinal detachment, like that. Now, the last one, as a means of a refractive measure. Okay? Now, there are now conditions where the patient experiences severe refractive error of refraction, no? So there are conditions that cannot be corrected by spectacle, by contact lens, or by LASIK surgery. If the myopia is severe or the error of refraction is severe, that you cannot do LASIK surgery because the cornea is very thin, then there is another option. Remember that the refraction of your eyeball is dependent on the refractive power of your cornea, the lens, and the axial length of the eyeball, no? So there are two things that you can change those factors, no? You cannot change the axial length, which is fixed. You can change the shape of the cornea by thinning the anterior portion or making a very thin out peripheral portion so that the central portion becomes thicker. Or you can alter the refractive power of your lens through cataract surgery and implantation. So right now, cataract surgery is being utilized as a refractive measure to correct refractive error that cannot be corrected by LASIK surgery or other means. Next slide. Okay, there are actually two main techniques of cataract surgery. No, we have the intracapsular cataract surgery, which is an old procedure, and it is being rarely used now. Okay, the only indications now for intracapsular cataract surgery is when there is severe dislocation of the lens, when there is loss of active support of the sonules. You can no longer hold the lens in its normal position. The only way to remove that is to intracapsular cataract surgery. When we say intracapsular cataract surgery, we remove the entire lens structure. Okay. Now, while the other procedure is called the extracapsular cataract extraction. In extracapsular cataract extraction, you remove the whole nucleus and cortex, okay? Leaving and part of the anterior capsule, leaving behind the posterior capsule intact, okay? We don't remove the posterior capsule because we want to place the intraocular lens in its normal position. So you place the intraocular lens in front of the anterior capsule. Okay. So these are the different techniques of your extracapsular cataract. We have your traditional ECCE. We have your manual small incision cataract surgery or MSICS. Then we have your phacoemulsification, which is ultrasound-driven cataract surgery, which is now the standard practice. And the last one, the latest one, is your laser-assisted cataract surgery using laser and ultrasound. Okay, next slide, please. Jen, next slide. Okay, this slide shows you the different techniques. On the left side, showing you a intracapsular technique, no? wherein this one, there is a larger incision, almost 180 degrees. You remove so that you can remove the whole lens. Okay? If your incision is smaller, then you cannot express out the whole lens. So you have to make a bigger incision, remove the whole lens, and you have to suture that. Okay. Now, the only indications now for intracapsular cataract surgery is your dislocated lens. Okay. Now, the most common type of cataract surgery that is being done now is through extracapsular, which is small incision or the traditional ECCE or phacoemulsification. The only contraindication for this extracapsular cataract surgery is your dislocated lens. Okay? So you will notice the indication for ICCE is your dislocated lens, while the contraindications for your ECCE or N or phaco is your dislocated lens. All other types of cataract surgery you can do with ECCE or phacoemulsification. In ECCE, the incision is smaller relative to your intracapsular cataract surgery. But in this procedure, you don't remove the whole lens. You make several cuts in the anterior capsule, okay? Removing majority of the anterior capsule, leaving behind the peripheral portion of your anterior capsule. So once you have removed the anterior capsule, you can now express out the nucleus and cortex through that incision. So the residual cortex can be aspirated manually, okay, by using a suction apparatus or syringe. Then upon cleaning the cortex, okay, you can place your intraocular lens inside the capsule, okay? So it is placed in front of your anterior capsule. So we call that in the bag technique. On the right side, you will notice a technique which we call phacoemulsification, which we use an ultrasonic equipment, no? And this time, we make a circular incision, clean incision of the anterior capsule. We don't want to make a ragged incision in the anterior capsule so that the incision will not extend into your posterior capsule, okay? So after removing a circular portion, central circular portion of your anterior capsule, the nucleus is fragmented by using a ultrasonic equipment, okay? You break down the nucleus into several small pieces, and at the same time, aspirate it. So leaving, cleaning the whole cortical and nuclear structure. So when you have adequately cleaned out the nucleus and the cortex, a viscoelastic material is placed inside the capsule so that you can insert the intraocular lens. So all cataract surgery now, except your intracapsular, are being done, and the refractive error is being corrected by inserting intraocular lens. In the intracapsular technique, you can also place intraocular lens, which is placed on top of your iris, which is not in its normal position because you cannot place it behind the iris unless you suture it, which is more difficult. So right now, almost 100% of the cataract surgery is being done with intraocular lens implantation. Okay, next slide, please. Chad, next slide. Now, how do we rehabilitate patient with aphakia. Okay, these are several methods of correcting the error of refraction for patient with aphakia. Now, if the cataract surgery is done intracapsularly or extracapsularly and IOL implantation was not done, then you can correct the error of refraction by spectacle. Now, with the spectacle, the lens becomes thicker. So there is problem with spectacle because the image of magnification is 25 to 30% bigger than normal. So it's very difficult to wear spectacle in patient with aphakia. Okay? So the image that you will see is much bigger normally, 25 to 30%. So if there is only one eye that is operated and the other eye is normal, you cannot use spectacle because the eye can only tolerate a difference of image magnification between 3 to 5%. So with the spectacle, you will have 25 to 30% difference in magnification. So if there is bilateral cataract extraction without intraocular lens implantation, you can use spectacle. Okay? Now the other option is your contact lens. Okay? With contact lens in a aphakic patient, the image magnification of your contact lens is bigger by 3%, which is tolerable. So if you have a monocular cataract and you correct that aphakia with contact lens, the eye can tolerate it. But if it is bilateral, you can also correct it with contact lens because the image magnification is smaller than spectacle. So it is more tolerable. Okay. Now, majority of the cataract surgery now is being done with intraocular implantation. The image magnification is more or less similar to your normal image magnification. So the choice now is intraocular lens implantation. Now with intraocular lens implantation, look at the picture on the left side below, showing you a intraocular lens inside the capsule. Okay, there are several types of intraocular lens. We have the monofocal, we have the trifocal, and we have the multifocal. In monofocal lens, we adjust the correction of the error of refraction of the patient to more or less we target a -1 myopia. Because with -1 myopia, the patient can see a little for near and a little for far without using spectacle. Okay? The residual error of refraction can be neutralized by prescribing spectacle, which is like a normal individual. No? Now with trifocal or multifocal, the error of refraction or the refractive power is corrected to more or less emetropia without using additional spectacle correction. No? So patient usually see clearly for far and see clearly for near. So in the multifocal lens, the most central portion is used for your near vision. And gradually towards the periphery is used for your distant vision. Okay? Also, some cannot tolerate multifocal, so now they have trifocal lenses. Now, in some cases where those who have been implanted with monofocal lenses and later on they wanted a better vision without using a spectacle correction, those residual error of refraction can now be corrected with LASIK surgery. So you can alter the refractive error by altering now the condition of the cornea through LASIK. So you can use LASIK as a correction for error of refraction in a residual aphakic patient. Okay. Next slide. Oh, tapos na tayo. Okay. Do you have any question about the topic?